Ian, welcome to the show, brother.
Yigal, it is great to be here. And I don't just say that to you. I say it to everybody. Wait a minute. No, I mean it's truly great to be hanging out with you. It's always fun when I get to talk to you.
Likewise, man. You've helped me so much. The first time we met, we talked about it on the pre-roll. Basically, you were giving a speech at an event that I was assisting at, and I was tasked with helping the speakers. And I heard you speak, and it was incredible. And I helped you take off a microphone while the crowd was surrounding you, wanting your attention. And so I had my hand up your shirt. So we got super intimate for a
Yeah,
moment.
and we shared a moment.
We did. And then I found out that you were a fellow tribesman, and we just created this friendship and this bond. And we've been working on getting on this podcast for a while. So I'm grateful for you taking the time to be here.
Of course.
Uh, I want to get into one thing with you because I think it's who you are. First of all, if you can kind of share where you're from for the guys listening, and we've been on a call back and forth. You've been the president of a shul. I've been the president, so we've given each other advice. You've mentored me both in business and in presidential congregational stuff. So that's incredible for me.
Yeah, well, you know what? So I live in the Washington, D.C. area. I grew up in Southern California, and I was born in Tennessee. You know, Tennessee, the mecca for Jewish families. Right? I think when my family moved out of there, we cut the Jewish population in half. And it's funny because growing up, my parents were both very involved in our synagogue, and in board level and things like that. And so I tended to be involved as well in our synagogue and through Jewish life. And from a business standpoint, I started my first company in 1993. We became on the Fast 50 list in the Washington D.C. area. So one of the 50 fastest growing companies. We then started a software company. Sold both companies in 2005. The acquiring company asked me to serve as managing director of the parent company, and we grew that company from combined value of 100 million to just over $2 billion in about
Wow.
3 years. And I was totally burned out and decided, well, I'm not going to do this anymore. I wasn't spending as much time as one or two with my wife or with our kids. And it's like, what am I going to do? And a bunch of friends of mine said, well, you always like helping our businesses when we're struggling. Why don't you help other companies grow? I'm like, people do that? Like, I had no idea. And that was 15 years ago. I've been doing this ever since.
Incredible. And behind you, if you're watching this video, you can see that you wrote a book called Same Side Selling. Tell us a little bit about how you were helping businesses grow, and then how did the book come about?
So the book came about. So the first book I wrote was called Upside Down Selling. It's all about kind of flipping traditional sales on its head. And during that process, I would teach these seminars to people, run these full day programs on that whole approach. And my co-author of Same Side Selling, Jack Quarles, attended this. And Jack's a guy who spent 2 decades in purchasing and procurement. And so I was thinking, wow, this is really cool. Jack's coming to this thing to learn how to use these techniques and what he's selling. And I found out later, Jack was like, no, it's just people who had gone through your stuff were convincing my clients that it was okay to spend a lot more for their stuff than with somebody else. I want to figure out what you were teaching them. And then I realized everything you were teaching them was integrity based. And I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. Jack and I talked afterwards and said, we should write a book about this, because every book on sales is either using a game metaphor where there's a winner and a loser, or there's a battle metaphor, in which case the loser dies. And then people wonder why there's an adversarial tension between buyer and seller. So this is all about how do you get on the same side, in essence, putting a puzzle together with your client instead of being involved in a death match.
I've also seen a lot of salespeople recently on Facebook talk about how to get into the psyche of the client and how to persuade and convince. And it all sounds a little bit mucky, like it just sounds a bit dirty, and you're all about integrity. And that's one of the reasons I brought you on. So talk to me a little bit about that, the sales process, how to not make it so icky.
Well, here's the reason why making it icky doesn't work. Because we've all been on the receiving end of the icky salesperson. And it feels slimy. And it's the reason why you walk into a store, the hyper ambitious salesperson walks up to you and says, may I help you? And we say, no, thanks, just looking. Because we've been taught that salespeople are only looking out for their own interests. They don't care about us.
Yeah.
if you can pivot that so that your client feels like you are more committed to their results than they are, their success and their results are more important than you making the sale, then all of a sudden everybody lowers their guard. You can have honest conversations. I believe effective sales is not about persuasion or coercion. Effective sales is about getting to the truth as quickly as possible. So you figure out who you can help the most and who you can't, and you focus on the people you can help the most, and you walk away from the people who you can't help the most, or you point them in another direction. And my clients have had dramatic growth by taking that approach that's all integrity based.
So you've got a bunch of Jewish guys listening to this podcast, and you just said something that might have upset or, threw a dart. You're like, you shouldn't care about the sale, right? But what I'm hearing is it's not just about making money. It's about actually helping the client and making sure the product's right for the client.
Well, think about this. If you sell somebody something and they don't get the results they were looking for, how much repeat and referral business are you expecting?
Yeah.
Zero. Because it used to be, if you did a bad job, someone might tell a few friends they know. Now they'll tell a million people they've never met. So you can't have a client where you're set up to fail and they're set up to fail, because it's going to come back to bite you. So this isn't entirely altruistic. It's like in our same side selling academy, every month we have this live coaches corner session. We ask people, tell me about what kind of success you had or failures in the last month. Every single session is someone talking about how, our typical sales cycle is 9 months. Now it's 4 months. Our typical deal is 200,000. Now it's 500,000. If those things weren't happening, it'd be really hard for us to continue to grow the academy, but it just grows every month because people are like, oh, so-and-so said that I got to join the academy. I got to be part of this. Or someone says, oh, my friend said you came in and worked with their company and they got amazing results. So we want to talk to you about helping our company. You're not going to get the phone call for someone who says, hey, so-and-so said they spent a lot of money with you and it really sucked. And we were thinking about pissing our money away. Like, it doesn't work that way. So it's not this thing where, gee, don't sell stuff. It's just figure out where you help people the most and sell that.
Yeah. And I've gone through the same side selling academy. If you're in business, if you're listening to this, reach out to Ian, check it out. The videos are incredible. Your Q&As are awesome. You look really handsome in your suit in the nice background as you answer the questions, and everyone's super engaged. But I want to dive into the term of integrity. And I think that putting it parallel to selling is tough, right? A lot of people sell based on just make the money, boo-boo, like just close your, bridge the gap and hit your goals, and it doesn't matter, and convince and push and be aggressive. Yet you talk about integrity. And I think that we've been friends for a while. There's integrity based everywhere around you, I think. And we all mess it up in leadership and we make mistakes. But when did you start learning about integrity yourself? And where did you see that was how you want to live your life and how you want to sell?
You know what? I mean, I think just like for most of us, it's something that's instilled within you by your parents. So my parents, taught by example. Like, they didn't say, oh, here's what the synagogue should be doing. It was like, well, this is what the synagogue should do, so I'm going to actually do that, right? And it's not, oh, people should contribute to the synagogue. Well, people should contribute to the synagogue. We're people, we're going to contribute to the synagogue. Like, it's one of those things where if your actions and your words are aligned, that's integrity. If you're telling people what they want to hear so that you get the sale, but that you don't care about their outcome, then all of a sudden you're not focused on the right things. And it's just one of those things that becomes self-defeating. Eventually there's no one you can sell to because everyone says, oh, that person's awful. So I think that notion of, all the time growing up, I remember my dad worked in clothing manufacturing and
Schmatta business.
In the schmatta business. And we had, at my baseball league, we had this contest for selling raffle tickets. And I said to my dad, I'm like, wow, like, can I go sell these at the plant? Because he was the head of manufacturing. Like, all right, this is easy. I just walk up to someone, they're going to buy it because, well, their boss's son is selling these things. He says, well, you can, as long as nobody knows that you're my son. I'm like, okay. He's like, because no one should buy this because they feel an obligation to me. But they're buying a $1 raffle ticket and they get a $2 coupon for pizza. So like there's some value there if you want to do it. And so I go into the factory and I'm talking to people as they're coming in and out of breaks and things like that. And this guy says, "Oh, I got to introduce you to somebody." He takes me down to the hall to my dad's office. And he says, "You got to meet this young man. He's for his baseball league. He's selling these raffle tickets, this and that." My dad says, "I'll talk to him. Thanks." Right? It's like, because the thing is, I would never go to his factory. Like, so no one knew who I was. It was like, oh, this kid's coming in. And like, but it was all about what's in it for them. So it wasn't, "Hey, will you support my baseball league?" It's, look, if you could buy a ticket for $1 and get $2 off, if you don't buy pizzas, then this is not a good deal for you. But if you do, how many do you buy in a year? Because I can sell you that many raffle tickets. And you have people like, "Well, yeah, give me a book of 20 because yeah, we easily buy 20 pizzas a year, and then we get $40 for it, and I only pay you 20, and it helps your league." And it's kind of like it was the first place I kind of learned the idea of sales, because I tried to sell in our neighborhood, and this one family like 3 doors down was really rude, and it's like I came home crying. I remember my mother said, "Well, so you can either give up, or you can figure out what your message needs to be to get people's attention."
Wow.
But you pick, right? And it's okay if you don't want to do it again. That's fine. If you want to quit, that's your choice. But you just figure out what's going to matter to people. And I ended up selling like 40 tickets to the people who were rude to me, because I walked past their house and there was, in their trash can was a pizza box, like 3 of them from the same company. And so I go to the place, I go to them, and it's like, and the husband was like really nasty, and like, which got me, home crying. Then I see the woman there, and it's like, I said, "Hey, I see that you guys get," it was Round Table Pizza. "I see you get Round Table Pizza, and we have these coupons for $2. It costs you $1 for each $2 coupon. And it looks like you guys buy Round Table Pizza, so it might be something that would benefit my baseball team and save you money." And so she's like, "I think that's a great idea." So she goes inside, and then her husband comes out, and I'm like, "Oh no, this is the guy like made me cry last time." And he says, "Young man, why didn't you tell me that you had these $2 coupons the first time?" Because I went to him the first time and said, "Hey, will you buy these raffle tickets for my baseball team?" Not, so I kind of learned, you got to focus on what the value is for them, not what it is you're selling.
There's a lot of people who sell based on like the goals in making money. And I think that even in our tradition, it's about being honest, right? There's books and rabbis who talk about integrity and being honest. When it comes to integrity, what does that mean for you when it comes to sales? What is integrity? Is it being open and honest? Like if you've got a product that's kind of shitty or that's not working with you, like, "Hey, this is kind of shitty. But what do you say to have full integrity when it comes to a process in sales?"
If you're selling something that's total dreck, I would say sell something else, right? But the thing is that, one person's junk is someone else's treasure. So the idea is that it's more, if I know that the customer needs these 3 capabilities and I can't deliver that, if I sold them the thing that can't do that, that client's going to suck me into the vortex of evil, and they're going to be unhappy, and it's just going to be a terrible situation for everybody. But I might have something where the product doesn't do 3 things, and I have a client who doesn't need those 3 things. And I can say to them, "Look, if you needed to do these 3 things, this isn't it. But if you need these other things, hey, that's great for you." It's like I get clients who, several of my clients are large organizations where they use our academy, and their people live inside of our academy. And other people say, "Oh, we have our own learning management system, and we want to embed that into ours." Well, I decided I didn't want to do that, because most of these systems don't work the way people want them to anyhow. So I'll say to people flat out, "Look, if you want this incorporated into your learning management system, this probably isn't the right platform for you. If you want something that shows you what your team is doing, and what they've attended, what they haven't, which quizzes they've passed, are they attending live sessions, all that, it'll give you all that in a concise dashboard. If you want it inside of your own system, we're not it." And so I'm telling them where it's a fit and where it isn't,
Yeah.
as opposed to, yeah, you could probably make that work. And I know it can't. Now I get the sale. And then they're telling everyone they know, well, this thing sucks. It doesn't do what we needed it to. So you might get the short-term sale and you get the long-term headache, as opposed to if you focus on what is it the client really needs and you know that you're serving their needs, then you're never really selling anything. You're just solving someone's needs. And so you can always show up in either a manner where you look like you're there to sell something or where you're there to solve something. And I would say you always want to show up to solve, not sell.
I love it. Sell or solve. You brought up your mom in messaging. And I think a lot of times, for example, on LinkedIn, we talked about LinkedIn a little bit. I get messages that say, hey, are you looking to, come into the Zoom call, or do you want to have 10 to 20 more clients as a coach? And do you want to make $30,000 as a coach? Let's talk about kind of like the process of finding leads with integrity. How does that work? I mean, are you out there messaging people who you think are going to want it, and then we see if it's a fit? What's the best way to do that?
I mean, fortunately, in my business, most things come inbound. So I'll talk more about like different ways to position that. So if someone is reaching out, how do you do that? Fundamentally, it comes down to understanding what are the elevator rants rather than the elevator. Instead of the elevator pitch, which is here's what I do, the elevator rant. A buddy of mine, Bob London, coined this term, the elevator rant. And I think he used it a different way, but I always give him credit for initially throwing out this term. But the idea is, what would your client complain about that you're good at solving? So, for example, if you're talking about leadership coaching that you do, right? It's not the people who say, man, we need a leadership coach, because the people who need a leadership coach don't know they need it.
Correct.
But it's more like what they might say is, I feel like I have decent people, but they're not accomplishing the goals that I think they should be accomplishing, or they don't feel motivated enough. So the idea is that instead of reaching out and saying, hey, do you need a leadership coach? You would say, like, I work with a lot of leaders and their teams usually fall into one of two or three categories where they need my help. They either have this problem, or that problem. If one of those rings a bell, happy to hop on a call to see if it's worth a further discussion. And so instead of saying, I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread, you need my stuff, and people are like, yeah, whatever, delete. Instead, you're saying, look, the people I help the most usually have one of these two or three problems, or they're facing one of these two or three challenges. If one of those piques your interest, I'm happy to learn more to see if we might be able to help. If not, there's really nothing for us to talk about. And it gets people to think, well, that must be really good, because it doesn't sound like he needs the business. Mm-hmm. But he does help people with something that I'm having a problem with. And the unfortunate reality is that the area where you can typically help your clients the most and where they need the most help is usually a blind spot for them. So if you think about it, how many people who need help with their personal relationships at their home acknowledge or aware of that? Yeah. Most of them aren't. But if you said, gee, a lot of people reach out to me because they find they take the stress from the office and they bring it home, and then they don't have that sense of harmony and peace at home. It feels like things get more complicated at home than they do even at work. Someone goes, yeah, I have that. Like, they're not in tune with the fact that they have this problem of separating the two. They just know that, yeah, I do have that tension at home. So it's describing the problems rather than describing the services.
That's exactly what I wrote down. It's essentially talking about the problem and not the solution.
Yeah.
Because as we talk about the problem, we're finding out, well, do they have the problem? And number two, I'm going to guess with integrity is, do they actually want to solve the problem?
Yeah. Is the problem worth solving? So sometimes people want to solve it, but it's just not worth solving for them. So that's a funnier part of it, because we teach something in same side selling called the same side quadrants. And the idea is that first someone says, well, gee, I have this issue. And you say, well, what happens if you don't solve it? And for some people are like, well, it's no big deal. Well, that person's not going to spend money trying to solve it. The person says, oh, if this keeps up, like my life is going to be miserable and my business is going to be in the toilet, and this, okay. Well, so how important is it to solve that? Well, it's probably like number 5 on my list. They're never going to do it. Like, it's the person who says, this is my top priority, I got to get this thing solved. Those are the people who are going to spend money to solve it.
Yeah. And so it's, when we talk about that with integrity as we're in business, and we're getting leads, either we're trying to generate them or they're coming in, it's really hard to say no. I think sometimes the Jewish guys, I've got guys listen to this who have started businesses recently, who are running their businesses for years. And with the economy going the way it is, with eggs being $7 a carton and gas in California being insane, it's really hard to say no to a sale.
Okay.
And essentially what you're saying is you've got to say no to a sale if it's not the right fit.
Yeah. So let me give you some case study examples that'll make people feel better. So there's a construction company I work with in Northern California. They were, keep in mind, good sized construction company. They were doing between $100 and $120 million a year, commercial construction a year for 3 years in a row. They felt they kind of plateaued. So I said to them, look, we want to focus on who you can help the most. And I want you to walk away from the deals, the people who aren't your ideal clients, but you could help, but we're going to walk away from those. And they said, well, no, you don't understand. We're trying to grow. That's not going to help us grow. I said, no, you're going to focus on the people you can help the most. So 5 years later, where are they at? Well, keep in mind, we had COVID and things like that. They finished last year at 600 million.
Wow.
And it's by walking away from stuff that isn't their ideal fit. Now, here's the funny part. Now I get phone calls from construction companies in California. And they reach out to me and they're like, well, like there are a couple sectors that like one of our competitors just owns that space now because everyone knows they're the go-to people for that market. And like, we don't know what they're doing. And I'm just laughing because I'm like, I know who it is and I know exactly what they're doing.
Like, sorry, I helped them get there.
Exactly. I'm your problem. Right? But the idea is that it sounds counterintuitive. But what I want people to realize is this. Think about what it's been like when you've taken on a client who's not the right client. And how much of your time does that take up? Versus the clients who are the right clients. What's that like? Well, generally people say, well, the clients who are the right fit, they almost energize me. Like it provides additional spark to my day and it tends to feed into other deals. Great. Well, what about the people who aren't a good fit? Oh, those people, it's like the bane of my existence. I hate it.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you want more of that? And it's that type of difficult decision that is what leads to companies experiencing extraordinary growth.
So it's essentially deciding to focus on a niche or an avatar and go headfirst and hard into that, as opposed to try to sell everywhere.
Yeah, well, think about it this way. When's the last time you referred somebody to a great generalist?
Yeah.
No one does. You're like, oh, these people specialize in your world. You don't go, well, here's somebody who's mediocre in your space and 37 other spaces. Let me refer you to them. Because now they don't really understand that client's world. They don't understand all the nuances. It's like, it's a mess, as opposed to if you really understood a certain industry, if you understood certain types of businesses, if you said, look, I'm gonna coach people who are, left-handed dyslexic business owners, like it might be too narrow. But if you define it with enough specificity, then you start focusing on the people who are the best fit and you walk away from the people who aren't. Yeah. It's like in my business, I tend to focus on businesses that are businesses selling to other businesses. And the exceptions to that are people in wealth management, because very often high net worth people make decisions the same way business people make decisions. I get people all the time who are like, well, so we have a whole bunch of auto mechanics at this conference. Why don't you come speak at it? I'm like, I'm not the right person. No, we've seen you speak. We think it'd be great. I'm like, but I don't deal with the stuff they deal with. So there are 20 other speakers you can get who would be more effective for that audience. And I consciously walk away from, whatever, it doesn't matter. I walk away from a good chunk of money where someone's saying, hey, we'll pay your fee. And so, I'm consciously saying, I'm not going to take your $25,000 because I don't think I'm the best fit for you. Yeah. Now, you have to have a mindset of abundance in order to do that. Because if you feel like that's the last 25 grand you're ever going to see, then you got Cirrus.
Yeah. How important is I know you teach like the selling. I've watched the videos in same side selling. Again, it's amazing. How important is having integrity in other areas of your life when it comes to combining it in business? And I'll give you an example. I've seen lots of people be very out of integrity in business, but at home, they go to synagogue, Yom Kippur, they say the prayers, they hit their heart, Hashamnu Baganu, or the other way around as well, where they have integrity at home, but not in business, or in business and the life is kind of messed up. So tell me how important integrity across all areas of life.
You know what? I don't know how to separate the two. Maybe some people can. I often find like there's people I know who I would meet them on a personal level and say, wow, this person's a real mensch. And everyone says they're a real SOB in business.
Yeah.
And then 5 years later, you realize they were an SOB in their personal life as well. So I think it's probably a misconception when we think someone is a mensch in one space and not in another. I think if they're not a mensch in one place, they're probably not a mensch elsewhere. You just may not see it. So someone like for example, there's someone I know who in the construction and real estate side of the world kind of has a reputation for being not a nice person and not an honest business person. And people would say, oh, but he's a mensch. He donates to a synagogue. Yeah, but guess what? The guy is worth, $300 million and he donates, a couple $1,000s a year. And people are like, oh, well, look, he donates to the shul. It's like, yeah, but he's just doing it to like buy favor with people. Yeah. He's not saying this is a cause I believe in. He's like, yeah, whatever. Okay. Yeah. Right. And it's not that, people have to decide what's important for them. There are areas of, there are areas of Jewish life that people may feel stronger about or less strongly about. I don't judge people based on what they contribute to and what they don't. It's more like if someone says this is important to me and then their actions show that it's not, that's a different story. If someone says, look, this isn't a big a priority for me, you kind of respect that. It's like I was the fundraising chair at one point at our shul. And I talk to people and they're like, this just isn't a priority for me. People are like, well, what do you do? I'm like, well, I give them reasons why maybe it should be a priority. But if they don't believe it is, like, I'm not going to change that. Like, it's okay. I have to respect the fact that there are people who are going to give beyond the point that's comfortable for them because it's a priority. And there's people who are going to give it a lower level because it's not a priority. And the fact that that both of them are contributing at a level they feel is appropriate is something you just have to accept and appreciate what they're doing.
Yeah. And I want to say something that's very, very important because I went through this a lot. Being a good guy, being a mensch doesn't mean that people walk all over you. It doesn't mean that you're taking advantage of. There's a good book called No More Mr. Nice Guy by Robert Glover, which I went into depth with that. I actually hired him as a coach for a while because I grew up hearing, be a good guy, be a good guy, be a good guy. And I let people walk all over me. Yeah. And that's also not an integrity if you don't set boundaries for yourself in my world.
Absolutely. Because the thing is, if you set yourself up where you're not providing for yourself, where you can't support your family and your clients, then you're not any good to anybody.
Yeah.
It's like I served as president of a country club twice, which if you want to find something you enjoy and learn to hate it, run it. Right? And
I was this close with the shul, this close.
and the thing is that fundamentally what I realized is, okay, I'm working my tail off on this and I'm neglecting other parts of my life.
Yeah.
Why am I doing this? So, and sometimes if you're a mensch, you're constantly giving. And as long as you're surrounded by other people who are looking out for you, it works out okay. Yeah. But ultimately, it's not about, oh, I'll give it to you this and I'm going to charge you less. It's about, I'm going to over deliver for every client I work with. And if you do that, it's like, in our academy, people don't pay a lot to be in the academy, but they feel like, man, anytime I ask a question, like Ian gets back to me right away. He'll call me and like, I wasn't even expecting a phone call. I mean, it's funny. I'll respond to people and like, well, is this really you? I'm like, well, who do you think it is? Well, we thought maybe it was just someone on your staff. I'm like, well, they don't respond to these things because they wouldn't necessarily know how I would respond. And so if you're getting a response, it's coming from me. If you get a note from someone that says, hi, this is Christina and Ian's out, but I'm sure I'll get back to you next week. That's probably Christina.
You're just like, I don't want to answer anybody today. I'll pretend I'm Christina.
Yeah.
Amazing. Awesome. Ian, I think that it's so important. A lot of young guys listen to this podcast, young Jewish guys in business, and we get very torn between having that integrity, right? And doing business to make money. And when we're surrounded by people who have integrity like yourself, and we're taught tactics to sell and grow a business from 100 million to 600 million, from your mouth to God's ears, as they say. And there is a way to have integrity in all aspects of life and still be successful and still be happy.
100%. And the one thing I always come back to is this: think about those clients where what you sold them wasn't really in their best interest, and fast forward in your head what it looks like 18 months from now. And it's not good. As opposed to if you guide someone to the right answer. Like I remember someone reached out to me once. It was for a large telecom company. They wanted me to speak at an event. And they said, we have this event and a bunch of people recommended you. It's for our top 500 women in sales. And I said, I'm really flattered. Let me ask you a question. Don't take offense to this. Do you think your audience would respond better to a woman speaking to them in sales versus a man, since this is your top 500 women in sales? And there's like a pause, and the person who was the event organizer was a woman. She says, I've talked to 3 speakers. You're the first person who asked that question. I said, okay, well, am I the only guy? She said, no, actually, they're all men. I said, well, I just feel like if I was a woman in your audience, I would say, well, great. So here are the top 500 women, and we're listening to some guy. She said, yeah, but a lot of people recommended you. I said, I get that, but can I recommend 2 or 3 women who I think would be amazing for your audience?
Awesome.
Right? And everyone's like, oh, well, once again, you walked away from business. 6 months later, they had a conference with 3,000 people across all their business, and the director said, reach out to Ian, because he pointed us in the right direction, this other person, and I want everyone to hear from him. Now, I didn't do this because I thought they might have an event for 3,000 people coming up later. It was just, I thought to myself, schmuck, like, do you want to be introduced? It's like, hey, we have the top 500 women. Here's a guy, right? It's like, here's this schmuck that we found, right? Like, it would have been bad for them.
Yeah.
But if you're always looking out for what's important for your client, if you're looking out for what's important for other people who are surrounding you, then what I find is that people see that and they say, all right, well, now how do I look out for them? And yes, some people are going to take advantage of you, and just accept that that's going to happen. But most people are going to appreciate it.
Love that. Ian, love you. Love your integrity. Love the human that you are. I appreciate you for being on the podcast. If anybody wants to become better in sales, has a B2B company like Ian is a master at, go to samesideselling.com. Is that right? Same Side Selling Academy?
Yeah, samesideselling.com. All roads point to the same place. It's
gotcha. Go to samesideselling.com, pick up the book, listen to Ian. You also have a podcast that they should listen to. I've learned so much from you, not just in sales, but so many other aspects of life. I appreciate you. And as we say here on the podcast, Chazak v'matz, strength and courage for all of your future endeavors, brother.
Thanks, brother. Love you, man.
Love you back. And stay tuned for the next episode of the Tribesmen Podcast.